up right in there, like as an execution pillar on the innovation side, uh, and combined with the the other topics that we have talked around through the last couple of days. Uh, I'd like to welcome Carl Madsen, the CISO at No Name Security, and we got a pretty interesting story about the No Name and his journey into or getting into No Name, and probably will give it a little bit more emphasis. But great to have you, and he'll introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you for joining us this morning virtually, and those in the room. So, Carl, please take it away.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Just to elaborate briefly, what I learned last night in discussion at dinner with Val is in no small part do I owe him for the role that I have today with No Name Security. It was actually about 2 years ago on a CISO delegation, which Val contributed to organizing, that I met the founders of the company, No Name Security, based or born in Tel Aviv, Israel, who is today my employer. So I thank you to Val for that introduction, and that sort of goes to show the spirit of innovation is alive, and those seeds get planted and they emerge sometimes years later. So thank you for that. So welcome, Carl Madsen. I'm the CISO for No Name Security. Pleasure to have everybody join us today. What I'd like to ask, because we just went through this fantastic discussion on the White House Moonshot Project, I'd like to maybe take this a little more tactical, because myself in particular, I am a military veteran, and I was a SIGINT analyst in the military, like I know so many people here locally in Augusta, Georgia have been over the years. But when I departed military service, I was about 30 years old, and it never occurred to me that I would be that entrepreneurship and innovation was something that I would do as my next step in my career. So I'd really like to think about how we can provide advice today at a very practical level, fostering innovation, fostering investment and entrepreneurship in a practical way. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the members of the panel today to first of all introduce yourselves and the organizations you come from, but also because innovators and investors in particular have unusual roles. So as you introduce yourself, can you please share also perhaps what a day in the life looks like for you? So, Eric, you're here in person. Let's start with you, please, sir.
Okay, got that microphone working. Hi, so my name is Eric Parker, and I am the founder of the Clubhouse, which is the innovation center here at the Georgia Cyber Center. And, my day-to-day, to be honest, is actually just figuring out two things. One, figuring out how we can finance the type of work that we do and make sure that it's sustainable in the community, and then trying to reinforce with my team the general importance of the work and supporting the people that are here. And so what I try to do is make sure that every day I talk to everybody on my team, find out a story about someone in our community and what they're doing, and figure out how we can help that person.
Thanks, Eric. Eric Harrison.
Hi, I'm Eric Harrison. I am the co-founder and chief technology officer for my startup Docket, which is a legal tech platform designed to help make lawyers a little bit more efficient in their day-to-day. My day-to-day kind of depends on what phase of company we're in. So right now we're really laser focused on building a really good product. I have a very small team of engineers. We're just adding new features and building things that make our customers happy.
And Valerie.
Wow, that's a pretty big question. So I'm the CEO and chief scientist of Tiger, which is a risk management SANA product. And anyone who, I believe Carl was mentioning, he had a SIGINT background, he may recall the SANA process. So for me, I like to call myself an accidental entrepreneur. So I came out of this as a problem solver, not looking to start a business or run anything really. So for me, my daily I guess practicum is, bite big and chew small. I have my phases. I know what I'm focused on. I know that things don't always go as planned, especially as an entrepreneur. So I just tackle it bit by bit by bit through this life cycle for this particular solution. So I would say it's flexibility. Obviously, I'm here at home. Life interferes with that, and there's my real life, my real job, and I'm also a doctoral student. So I think just day-to-day entrepreneurs have to be just very open to and flexible to the changes and what the priorities are, and your priorities change sometimes hourly.
And Javier Ortiz.
Well, good morning. Lots of planes, lots of breakfasts, lunches, dinners, meeting a lot of people, talking about how to partner, how to solve difficult problems, how to help folks get customers, and ultimately accelerate growth. Because as we partner with entrepreneurs, that is what brings us together and gets us to in front of as many customers as possible to tell our story and what we're trying to get done.
Thanks, everyone. We will probably spend some time today talking about, from a policy or practical perspective, things that we could do differently. But we are here at the Georgia Cyber Center, I think, which is almost a cathedral of a success story in innovation investment. So I'd like to first start from your vantage point. What do you think we're doing right? What is the state of Georgia doing right? And what do you see in your world? What are the resources that work well and the accesses that work for you in your perspective?
So I'll always go back to, we started the clubhouse 10 years ago in Augusta, and it's a nonprofit. And, at the end of the day, I would say that we've never been the best business people around how to support entrepreneurs. We've just been really passionate about making sure that they can succeed. And one of the things that really was amazing about the partnership that we were able to create with the Georgia Cyber Center is how, honestly, having the state invest in this Class A facility where we have access to all the students, all the companies, GBI, everything that's here, it created an additional center of gravity for this type of work, which actually, and I know this might seem boring to a lot of people, but for the work that we do, it helped provide this financial underlying cushion for it, because just having an amazing space meant that we were able to double our membership over the course of the first 6 months of moving in, which ultimately is about $72,000 a year of revenue for us, which pays for salaries for people to do the work to support the entrepreneurs. And so I know that's not the real sexy part of it, but that's the underneath part, is how do you make these ecosystems sustainable? And I think that in our community, we're really, figuring that out.
Thanks. And Valerie, as an entrepreneur, what are the pillars that you've been able to lean into successfully for support or investment?
Well, I'd say up here in Canada, I'm probably a little bit more unique. I self-funded completely, so which I wouldn't really recommend to anybody going at it alone for your initial phase. It's very difficult. I am glad I did it that way. But I think programmatically what I'm seeing and what I like, now I think at the point of maturation that I'm at with the company, I'm seeing a lot of focus on second careers. So skill sets that are being fostered from second careers and from students. So we've got both ends of the spectrum, which I think is really important. I rely on those resources because those are the folks I need to do my development, to manage certain aspects of my life cycle. And I think, 10, 15 years ago, it was really focused on our educational systems and academia, and to some extent it was treated like a trade. So now I like that it's been very professionalized, and I like that we're seeing folks coming in from their prior careers with some really, really strong industry experience. And I think the other thing I'm seeing more and more in both Canada and the US is that entrepreneurs we're not just looked at as one type of entrepreneur. So I think at one point, maybe a couple decades ago, it was true that you were an entrepreneur and you wanted to run your own business and you were very focused on that. But now I think we're seeing a lot more, new breed entrepreneurs coming in that are problem solvers who are not particularly good at the marketing, administrative, the business aspects, and they really, really rely on that. And I can admit I am one of them. I am through and through a nerd. I am a technical person. I solve problems. And the other stuff I have an understanding of, but I really rely on the experts. And seeing that coming through in the program, certainly in Georgia and other states, and also up here in Canada, is really comforting and really important, because it makes me feel that the cohorts coming after me will have so much better support and a much more a better constellation of experiences available to them.
And Eric Harrison, over to you. Same question.
Yeah, so I think the state of Georgia specifically is still struggling on the investment side, right? So with Docket, we got all of our venture capital, for the most part, we had to go out west, San Francisco. That's where we raised all of our capital. What Georgia, specifically this region, has been doing very well is we've got people like Eric Parker, beating on the drum of innovation over and over and over again. I am exactly where I am today because of the time and energy that he put into building this type of community for us. Letting us, for things as small as just letting engineers get together and have hackathons, to asking us to push ourselves to do better. That type of innovation and that type of culture that is being built around groups like the Clubhouse and groups like that in other areas is, I think, leading us towards hopefully a brighter future with more and more people taking that plunge into entrepreneurship and building new companies.
Mr. Ortiz, I'd like to ask that question a little differently for you, which is, what do you see the best entrepreneurs and the best companies? What are the themes that you see? What's the recipes that you see consistently with successful young companies?
I think both Eric Harrison, that is, and Valerie said it correctly. You know what you know, and you know what you're not good at, and you partner with those folks that can help you around the areas of the business that are necessary, but you're not necessarily either interested or knowledgeable to get focused on. And that's really what Eric too has done really well. In there's an internal joke about Eric 1 and Eric 2. So Eric 2 can explain that to you there in person in a bit. But I think that's really where Eric and Clubhouse come in, bring that ecosystem that has different experiences together to round what the entrepreneur has and the idea of the business that they have and move it forward. So for Georgia, very proud to live in this great state and seeing where we're now bringing money to be part of the equation and partner with places like Clubhouse to be able to, early in the process, do the capital that Valerie described, that perhaps entrepreneurs shouldn't be doing everything on their own, all the way through the big private equity money, where you've gotten a lot of traction in the market and are able to continue to grow and partner with growth capital. So I think that these are all pieces that you're seeing coming together. And as Eric 1 described, going to California and then coming back to Georgia, now you're seeing a lot of folks that are benefiting from what Eric brought with him, which is money and the ability to connect folks like Falcon Cyber and others that have money that can come in, and you don't have to leave the state anymore. And you can actually go to amazing places like Augusta, Georgia, that has for cybersecurity, an amazing ecosystem built mostly around the military investments, that date 20, 30 years back, to the stuff that it's going on today with state and local agencies and the private sector.
So a topic that, of course, permeates all of our life is COVID and work remote. And so starting with Eric Parker, what's changed in the last 2 years in investment and entrepreneurship. And if could you project forward a year or two to think about how is the chessboard changing now because of the way that we work?
Sure, but first I have to ask Harrison how many shares you gave Javier to get him to call Eric one for this.
That's between him and I. Don't worry about it.
Okay. So yeah, COVID obviously has been a huge challenge because, I gave you the boring answer, which is the finance piece and talking about, how we work with staff in my personal day-to-day, but what we really do best in our community when we're at our best is we are a community center for entrepreneurs and innovators and technologists in the Augusta area. And the challenge that COVID created obviously was how do you create a community center when people can't convene next to each other? And we did everything we could through that to try to recreate the magic of community events in a digital space. Obviously, I think everybody has that exact same hatred of Zoom at this point, and I wish that everybody here on this panel could be here in person, and we're almost there as a society. But what it did was it allowed us, even as an organization, to really double down on, okay, programmatically, how do we reinforce the outcomes for people in our communities, and how do we begin to eliminate the distance that exists between people, even when we're in a community and we have our silos, because now we all have a silo, which is our desk at our home with our screen in front of us, and then the rest of the world is out there and we have to reach out to them in some way. So we began partnering with organizations across the entire state of Georgia. We actually received a grant through the Lieutenant Governor's office here to develop a mesh network of innovation in the state, where we're providing pre-accelerator programs for entrepreneurs in Atlanta, Augusta, Columbus, Macon, and Savannah. So we've got 5 cities across the state of Georgia that we're all sort of marching to the same tune now, and we're able to leverage the distinct sector expertise that each community has to allow the entrepreneurs to grow and to increase access to investment. And so I think that's going to be the game changer for us in the state of Georgia post-COVID, is leveraging the idea of digital technologies and the notion of creating a mesh network of physical spaces that now interact in the way that we never realized we could pre-COVID, because we were all locked into this idea of real estate and being in a specific physical location.
So question for Valerie and then Eric. Work remote, is it limiting or liberating for you as an entrepreneur?
Wow, that's a tough one. I guess it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think it really depends on your degree of discipline, but you have to get creative with your human interactions. I think I have my collection of badges to conferences that I'm very proud of. I love conferences. I love seeing people. I love chatting with them, seeing their faces, their expressions, and them seeing mine, because there's a lot of hard sells that you have to discuss with people that there truly is a one dimension with Zoom and BTC. So I think it's a little bit of both. The flexibility has been amazing for my creativity and my productivity, for myself in isolation as one person, but you really do need to make an effort, I feel, to really foster those relationships with your other folks. Otherwise, it can be very easy to lose touch with them. So the cohesion of your team, I think, is really important. And I think that has sort of brought us to honing some new skills in those areas, in leveraging this amazing technology that has been available for many, many years. We've really put it to good use in a very dire situation. But I think it also underscores the importance of maintaining those really good human relationships and taking care of them. So.
And Eric.
Yeah, for me, I'm obviously biased. I'm a software engineer first, right? So I'm an engineering leader. So my work is done at a computer typing by myself. So being able to be fully remote and having the companies embrace that has been a game changer, because now I can have my environment set up exactly like I want. From an engineering leader perspective, it's been amazing, because now I don't have to hire the best software engineer in Augusta. I can hire the best software engineer in the world for my business. And so now it's opened up an entire new realm of possibilities, letting my employees work wherever they live, travel if they want to, as long as they've got access to the internet and a laptop. We've got employees that just kind of bounce around the country. It's made us more productive and more competitive with less money and less resources.
And I'll personally double down on Eric's comments. About a year and a half ago, a peer of mine, Cyrus, who shared a book with me called The Epic Guide to Agile Development. And what's brilliant about this particular outline of software development delivery is it specifically emphasizes the communication pathways that, especially like in a remote work environment, I found is just sort of essential. And so I almost think of that to me as a leadership guide to work remote. It's called the Epic Guide. I highly recommend it. Javi, just as you've gone through the last 18 months, are you making investments with founders and companies that you've never been able to meet in person? And how do you evaluate, if you can't sit across the table from somebody, how do you get a good read about the leadership team and the company that you may make an invest in?
It's a great question, because I think that to Eric Wan, that's how I will remind everybody here, as Eric Wan described, you are not able to go find who the best person is. And so if I'm a techie, used to be a techie by training, so you want somebody who can write code, can write it efficiently, can write to the standard that you're looking for. And sometimes showing is better than just telling you. So we may have changed the paradigm, the interview paradigm that we used to have, and being interested in talking to the person in person to be able to assess what they were trying to do or they could do, where you can now do that in a show me mode that is more technical, that if you're a technical person, using technology to demonstrate your technical skills seems like the right thing to do. So I think that's very similar. So if you're good at keeping your books, you have great books, and a lot of times those books are online. That's one of the elements that we would look for in a company that's well run. If you have also all your documentation, all those sort of things, you're using technology to be able to assess what they are. And then ultimately, for me, I'd like to have that one-to-one meeting. I've traveled since March of last year. I returned from Europe March 8th of 2020. And I have been, whenever possible, have been traveling throughout the country and overseas. But I think it's really cut down on the reason for travel. So perhaps you may not necessarily travel to do the initial meeting. You may travel to kind of when you're closer to trying to make an investment. So it's also changed a bit of that paradigm. And in this, one of the things that I plan on doing is to go visit Eric 1 and Eric 2 in Augusta here pretty soon. I'm 2 hours away in Atlanta. And that makes it a lot easier, because we can have these kind of conversations, but then we can always go share a meal and kind of get closer together. So perhaps one way of thinking of technology is that it enables those personal relationships that Valerie was talking about, because you could get there a little faster than perhaps you could have gotten if you had to travel.
And as you meet with companies and evaluate, do you see any segments or perhaps verticals that are very much lacking in investment? Where are you looking for entrepreneurs to emerge but haven't seen that yet?
So it's an interesting question, because I think it's really a matter of access to the ideas that you're looking for. I'm fairly certain that somewhere in the world there's somebody who's doing something that you think it's really cool. For me, it's cybersecurity. So for us, we're really looking at places like Augusta, close to home, Colorado Springs, places outside of DC, where, as you were describing at the beginning, there are a lot of folks that come out of the military or government service that have an incredible capability because of the work that they were doing when they were in government, and now have that entrepreneurial spirit and have somewhat of the Valerie experience. I know how to do technology, and I would like to not necessarily be an expert at finance or be an expert at capture management or be an expert at something else. So these ecosystems, and I think that what Eric too is doing in Augusta is really build that ecosystem there. So I don't know that I can tell you that I'm looking for something that I can't find. But what I do know is that technology is enabling the ability to connect with a broader set of folks. This morning I was on the phone at 6 a.m. on a call with folks in the Middle East that literally moved from Europe to the Middle East to start a cybersecurity company. I don't know that we would have been able to have that conversation pre-COVID, not because we didn't have the technology, but I don't think that we had that mindset that we could access deals and access people, repurpose folks, right? Valerie talked about folks that are in second or third careers, have retired a couple of times and are sitting at home, and maybe the next best coder that Eric is looking for, Eric one that is looking for. And I don't know that he would have been able to find that person as easily 2 years ago that he could do it today.
So back over to Eric Parker. We've talked a lot about the talent gap and the degree to which we may be challenged to fill our cybersecurity roles nationwide. Are we doing enough to spark entrepreneurship, innovation early in careers of college students, or while a veteran is during service? Or do you have any recommendations for what we could do more of to get those wheels turning earlier in someone's career? We've talked a lot about people joining and taking an innovative mindset, maybe later career as a second career. How do we reach that entrepreneur earlier?
I'm glad you expanded upon the question, because at first my answer was going to be no. And that was going to be like, we don't do enough to support entrepreneurs and even make people think that entrepreneurship is a pathway. One of the most common refrains that I tell everybody is that, even within what historically we've referred to as an education system, we very commonly refer to it as a workforce development system now, which means that you're training people to go into jobs in certain career fields. But one of those key fields is entrepreneurship. And one of the main things that we are battling as an organization is getting entrepreneurial skills recognized as one of the key pillars of education in our country. And so that's that pre-accelerator program that we're doing is specifically funded through workforce development dollars as the only entrepreneurial skills training certification of its kind that we know of in the country right now. And so that's a key piece of it. But I think that at every level, what we have to do is just focus, regardless of whether someone's going to become an entrepreneur or they're going to become a developer, stop feeling like we have to define every parameter of a challenge for people. Just get them to understand there is a challenge and they have to figure it out. Like in life, like, does anybody have a manual for how to raise your kid or how to have a good marriage or what you're supposed to do? Like, we don't get any of that. You don't get it for starting a business or anything, but we try so hard to standardize everything about our lives and our education now, because we're in this hyper competitive mode of we have to beat China, right? Like, there's 1.3, 1.4 billion people, whatever it is. So they have a mountain of people that they can just keep training and training and training, and they can do this standardized method, and it can work for them. We have less people. We have to be creative, right? So that's the only way we can fight this fight as a country, is to be entrepreneurs. And so I would say that we have to stop thinking that there's a perfect algorithm that matches every person in the country, and realize that they're all individuals and educate them in that way.
And for Valerie and for Eric again, do you have access to, I know Eric 1 and Eric 2, of course, but mentors, coaches, people that you look up to as models that kind of can help you as entrepreneurs fill the gaps to build your businesses?
I do. I've been very lucky in that respect. A lot of those mentors have come from organizations I've been involved in for years up here in Canada and in the US. And they do span various industries. So policing, military, also cyber. But I think it's good to have a myriad of mentors, 2 or 3 or even 4 good mentors they're very multispectral in their support and their experiences. Because I think as an entrepreneur, you'll find there's a number of challenges and a number of supports you do require. You do require a good support system. And you also need people, I think, that will mentor you and really help you stay focused on innovation and creativity. Because I think the more you get into the process of developing to creating something, you move yourself further away from that creative milieu. And just as you mentioned, standardization, when we get into trying to standardize and produce entrepreneurs, it's a very difficult proposition because we want them to be creative, we want them to be fluid, we want them to be innovative, and those things are very hard to create, much less standardized. So yeah, I'm a big supporter of mentors, and I've been very, very, very lucky. I feel like naming them, but I guess I shouldn't do that. It's not appropriate, but I've been very lucky.
And Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to add that Valerie didn't already eloquently say. I have access to lots of mentors. For me, it's always been previous managers, previous people that were responsible for leading me in a career direction. I've just continued to keep in touch with them, try to pick their brain as much as possible while we're working together, so that I get better as a person at each and every position I've held over the last 20 years. One thing on referencing the previous question about like how COVID has impacted us, like I think this is one of the areas that we've been the most damaged, right? We don't have as many in-person meeting events where you get to just meet new people just through random happenstance. And I think that that has actually harmed us quite a bit because of less of those opportunities to meet new mentors and just run into people smarter than you.
So for each of you, perhaps you have a different perspective on this question, but what could we ask of public policymakers, state, local, federal, that could help our innovation and entrepreneur communities thrive, particularly exactly as Eric mentioned, that the ability to create community is difficult. So what could governments do to underwrite that in a meaningful way? Let's start with Eric.
You might have to let me stand up and really preach
Okay.
on that one. I'll try to stay focused here. We don't invest enough in people, I think is what it really comes down to. And so really, there's an organization like us in virtually every community in the country. We're run by people like me who are really dedicated to understanding that while business is ruthless competition, it's run by people. So even though businesses can fail, the people shouldn't fail. And so like we need to find a way to support them so that the cost of failure isn't everything you have as a person. That comes down to governments providing maybe a little bit better safety net, I think, for people, whether it's, I don't want to get political here, but whether it's our healthcare system or whether it's looking at how do you provide the funding mechanisms to support the entrepreneur support organizations themselves. But then as a community, we also need to really dig into early, like we've redefined seed stage capital where it's this really high bar now, but where do people get their first $50,000 to $100,000 to take a leap instead of just thinking about it as like, okay, well, here's this first $1.2 million round. As Eric Harrison said, it's so difficult for an entrepreneur in this community to raise $100,000. And so if you can have a job in cybersecurity where you are most likely making over $100,000, why on earth would you risk that when there is no early stage seed capital available for you to take a chance. There's just nobody's going to be an entrepreneur until we solve that capital problem. I don't know the government's the right source to solve the investment capital problem. That's a big ideological debate that we can all have.
Javi, what would you ask of public policymakers?
So I'll tell you, we asked just Wednesday in Washington, D.C., we had a number of meetings with senators that are focused on technology and focused on cybersecurity. And this is where all this comes full circle, and where Val's work on this conference comes full circle. I was able to describe the work that Eric too is doing in Augusta, Georgia, and how I thought that there would be an interesting way to have a cybersecurity focused program that could help him extract the gems, if you will, or help the gems kind of come to the forefront where there could be investment. And, we talked about different tools available. So we need to have those conversations with our policymakers, and we need to share those ideas that are actionable with them. I agree with Eric too, that government doesn't really solve all the problems, and perhaps may not necessarily be the right tool to solve the early investment problem, but they do have the ability to maybe tip the scales a little bit, right? Eric too spoke about China and the competitiveness that we're trying to build around China. Well, I do think that government has a little bit of a role there, and so we have some ideas. I'm breaking news to Eric too, so give me a call later this week and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But I think we should be engaged with those folks. We should be showing them what we're doing. We should be framing what's within the art of the possible, and then helping fuel folks. I personally invest in people early on where the fund may not be able to do it. I've personally invested with companies trying to address what Valerie said early on. So bring some money in, bring some capabilities, bring some mentoring. Not that I'm a really good mentor, but I'm usually a pretty good sounding board, and people can share what some of the concerns that they have or what they're trying to do, and then kind of walk through the process. We don't, an entrepreneur doesn't necessarily understand angel rounds and, seed rounds and B and C and A and PE money. But if they're connected with folks that have been there, have done that, then that may provide that environment. So I do think that government plays a role in enabling that process. Maybe a little bit of money, but certainly a lot of enablement. In Georgia specifically, where you guys are sitting there, that's part of the public-private partnership scenario that we should be building more of, because that was only possible. And what's going on in cybersecurity was because government did something to enable the ecosystem that Eric too is trying to build there.
Valerie, then Eric, as an entrepreneur, is there something that the public sector could be doing or could have done for you that really would have been a meaningful accelerant to you building a business?
For me, actually, I want to touch on a little bit of what Javier had said, because I think government plays an important role, industry plays an important role. And I was a product of Nortel, and Nortel had numerous spin-offs of their employees, not because their employees didn't want to stay and they wanted to start their own company. It was because Nortel fostered that, and they allowed us to be creative. They had internal programs that helped us develop our own IP with the infrastructure of the corporation around us. So I just wanted to touch on that a bit, because I feel like industry has lost that. I know Nortel was many moons ago, but they had some things right. And I think they turned out very good, strong experts in particular fields. I would say, as far as the public sector, the worst thing, or the thing that government is the worst at, is at communication. And no one will ever convince me otherwise. So bureaucracy is a big problem. Rigidity and bureaucracy for entrepreneurs are literally death stabs. And when we get into a lot of the programs that are put forward, they need to be accessible and understandable. And there needs to be some guidance with respect to them, because they can't be onerous processes if you're asking people who are entrepreneurs, very creative, highly motivated, A-type personalities, and they're filling out 20-page forms, and it's going from one person to another person to another person, and it's this long drawn out process that absolutely kills creativity and innovation. So I think that time, and it does also affect time to market. So there's a lot of factors in there that we rely on industry, we rely on government, but I think we have to take the good things of both. And I think, you know, Max Weber had bureaucracy down pat. If we go back to that model of where bureaucracy is meant to enable and to really move forward particular initiatives, it's very useful. But I think we just have to be very cautious around that and how it's presented towards entrepreneurial programs.
So we're running at our time right now. We're going to take a break. I'd like to start with Eric, then Valerie, then Javi, and end with Eric here in person. One piece of advice that you would give someone today who's considering starting a company, an entrepreneur, what's a nugget of advice you would give that person?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's just take that first step. You don't know everything. None of us here know everything, right? We just keep going until we run into a roadblock and solve that problem and move on to the next roadblock. Just begin.
Valerie?
I would say definitely think big. Don't let anyone tell you not to. But understand scale. Understand scale with respect to technology and also to investment and growth. I think those are really important things for me to really learn and grasp those concepts.
Great. Javi?
Find the problem to solve and start solving that problem. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving.
Mr. Parker?
It's hard to go better than anybody else. So just adding on to that, figure out how your business can do something even if you're no longer there, because then you can sell it.
Brilliant. Thank you to everybody on our panel this morning. I believe I'm standing in the way of a short break. So 10:35, 10:40, what's our time back? Leah, do you want to send us off?
That continues this conversation.
Fantastic.
So I do want to thank Carl. Thank you very
Thank you,
much. And all of these folks here for this great discussion. All right. So Palol, I believe we are moving to be next. Okay. Thank you for the folks who joined us virtually. Okay, that being said, a gentleman here who's been with us this week from our home state, Texas, San Antonio, Sam Ryan, I'd like to invite him to the stage to share a bit during our break. He's the CEO of a company called Sibber, which is an advisor firm. He's also former Air Force, and over the last few years, he has oversaw the largest portfolio of highly classified offensive and defensive cyber weapon programs, including addressing the artificial intelligence, big data, and quantum computing needs of the Air Force. So please welcome him. He's going to share his insights